Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Wise Body Podcast, where we talk about eating disorder recovery and all things body. I'm your host, Dr. Sarah Hughes. I bring 20 years of experience as an eating disorder therapist, and I've worked with hundreds of clients to feel more empowered and connected to their body by tapping into the wisdom it holds. I'm so excited to keep learning with you as we navigate the windy path that is recovery. So let's get started. Hi, and welcome to the Wise Body Podcast. It is a true honor and privilege to welcome my very first guest to the very first episode of the Wise Body Podcast, Dr. Margo Maine. Dr. Maine is a renowned expert and trailblazing pioneer with 40 years of experience in the field of eating disorders. She has written 8 books and has received too many to count honorary and lifetime achievement awards. She is the founder of the Academy for Eating Disorders, the National Eating Disorder Association, and the Eating Disorder Coalition for Research, Policy, and Action. A true force to be reckoned with. She is a fierce advocate, researcher, and top leading psychologist. She is my heroic mentor, colleague, and I am so lucky to call her my friend for the past 20 years. I can't think of a more perfectly suitable first guest. Please welcome my very first, number one guest, Dr. Margo Maine.
Hi, Margo Maine. Thank you so much for being my very first guest on the Wise Body Podcast. Welcome. So happy to have you here.
It's great to be here with you, Sarah. We've known each other for a long time, and this is really fun for me, too.
I was thinking about that. Just yesterday, I met you. And I know I've talked about this with you before, but in Boston, I think it was APA 2005 or 6. And so that would mean 20 years.
Yeah. Wow, it's 20 years. My goodness.
I know.
Wow.
So,
yeah, I remember meeting you. Yeah, I was speaking at APA with a couple of other folks.
You were on a panel and you gave an amazing, as always, lecture on eating disorders. And I knew who you were. And I said, I have to meet you. Like I was like a little groupie and came up after your lecture and introduced myself. And then it turned out that you were from West Hartford, which is where I'm from, Hartford, West Hartford. And then
the rest is history, as they say.
The rest is history. But I have to share with our audience that it was so important to me that you are my very first guest, and it feels very, very appropriate that you are, because you are an amazing mentor, my inspiration for this work against hard, right? And so I'm just so honored, and I just want that to be known to everyone, how special it is that you are number one guest. And I also was thinking about, like, even just in doing this podcast, how your book Body Wars, I reread that recently. And that's a big reason for this podcast too, is that, you know, just maintaining this initiative to change our culture, really challenge diet culture. And so I just, all of this aligned and here we are. So thank you so much from like the bottom of my heart that you are here. You are one of my heroes. So thank you.
Well, I want to stop for just a second because you said something that was really important, that I've been a mentor to you, and I'm really thrilled about that. It's really important that we all do this for each other, because when I was growing up in the field, there was nobody ahead of me. There were no women ahead of me, and there were not even many men ahead of me. And so eating disorders is a very new field. We are about 40 years old. And so I and my colleagues we're the first class. And when I was deciding to specialize in eating disorders, the people who were above me, my supervisors and professors, all said to me that I shouldn't specialize in eating disorders because they were just a fad and they would go away. I knew intuitively as a woman that eating disorders were not just a fad. And even if they were pretty damn serious for a fad. But it is really, really important that we have people ahead of us and next to us and coming behind us, and that we are all in this together. So I appreciate being your mentor, and it's helped me to grow too. So thank you.
Of course. And, I mentioned, you didn't hear this part, but in my introduction of you and your bio, you're a pioneer for sure. And your work is so important. And you are part of, this initiative, this initial team of psychologists that, and I know, your group, and you're so bonded and so connected. And so I really I honor you, and I honor all of your friends and colleagues that really held steadfast to this strong initiative to help people with eating disorders.
Yes.
So important. And so I feel like we're getting at our first question. So, and my listeners know that I focus on 5 questions, which will probably, other questions may come from those. But the first is how and why did you become an eating disorder psychologist? And I feel like you touched on that a little bit. I don't know if you have more of a story.
Yeah. When I was a graduate student and doing internships and all of that, I was very interested in the psychology of women. I was interested in gender. I was interested in psychosomatic medicine. I was interested in the impact of culture on our functioning and on gender. So I had a whole bunch of things in the back of my head all the time. When I was doing an internship forever, a multi-year internship at the Children's Hospital, which at the time was the Newington Children's Hospital before Connecticut Children's Medical Center, we started to see some eating disorders. And I really was attracted to them because it kind of blended together a lot of the things I was interested in. And I just knew intuitively that this was the beginning of something. I had a feeling that as women struggling in this culture that was only becoming more and more focused on the body and more focused on competition and all kinds of negative things, I knew that this was going to be a really unhealthy playground for all of us. And so that's what got me into the field of eating disorders. And once I got there, I was a little bit worried, as I think many people are, that specializing might be boring. Well, this is the least boring I could have ever imagined a career. It's not at all boring. Right. If you really work with an individual, you're never going to be bored. If you really listen to their story, maybe their symptoms are similar to somebody else's symptoms, but their story is their story. And eating disorders have so many ramifications and affect every system in your body and your spiritual system and your social network and all kinds of things. So it really is, it's an incredibly rich field, and it's a deadly disorder. So if people don't get help early and get help that really helps, they can end up suffering for all of their lives. They can end up dying. And because it has been historically mostly women, it is now really spread across genders and race, et cetera. But because we think of it as a women's disorder, it has not gotten the attention it needs. And I think that we don't know enough and we don't do enough for it. So I've been very, very impassioned to be a champion for eating disorders because of all of that. So I was interested intellectually in some of the things. I really was interested in helping to develop the psychology of women. And then when I saw the importance of us really looking at this seriously and taking this problem seriously, and making hospitals do something about them, and making insurance companies pay for them. The cat ran away with a spoon, and there I was.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you were such a strong advocate and knew, right, how big of a problem, and has been, and still is for sure. And I think we have sort of a saying in the field that eating disorders don't discriminate. And so, I think you were part of the challenge of really educating people that this isn't, right, the white rich girl's disease. Yes. Right. And I think so important to know that. I think because there's so much so many misconceptions about eating disorders and just lack of knowledge. And so that effort is undying, right? That the education still needs to happen. And I feel like that's one of my favorite parts about the work is debunking myths, challenging misconceptions,
and also like working with parents too, with children with eating disorders, right? Because it's so scary and especially with, just not knowing so much. So anyway, I know that you've done so much work there. So really, really thank you for that. I'm indebted to Margo for so many reasons, but like Matt also is one of them. It's just really informing people what eating disorders are, how devastating they are. And so I know that you've been in this field, you said 40 years. That's so impressive. I've been in this field half that time and it feels still long. So what keeps you doing it? What keeps you writing and presenting and advocating? And I know that you are such a strong advocate and for like, that's a big part of your work is advocating
it is a job that never ends as a clinician. You're always wanting to do more for your patients and all of that. But also because eating disorders are so misunderstood and because they need so much in terms of treatment and support, it's given me opportunities to do a lot of advocacy work. I was one of the initial people. I'm a founder of many organizations like the Academy for Eating Disorders, the National Eating Disorders Association, and the Eating Disorders Coalition for Research Policy and Action, which advocates in Washington for federal legislation. I'm not so active in it now, but I was on the board for a long time and one of the initial people. So it's been nice to have something that challenges you, not just intellectually, but every fiber in your being gets challenged by this. And, going to Washington and talking to legislators and all of that has been an exciting part of the work as well. I think what keeps me hooked is there's something very addictive about helping people. And when young people ask me, well, what should I do for a career? And I want to do this, I want to do that. I said, just find a career where you help people. Like if you help people, you're going to be happy because you're going to know you're doing something worthwhile. And, I picked a field that is also heartbreaking. People with eating disorders really, really suffer. And most will get better, but they suffer along the way and their families suffer and their friends suffer. Everybody around them suffers. It's really a very tough disorder, and yet they're glamorized and made fun of and not taken seriously.
I want to insert a question here, but I'm just thinking of what's maybe been most heartbreaking about it for you.
Okay, yeah, well...
Heavy, sorry.
Yeah, no, for a long time, one of the things we do is we talk about statistics when we do presentations about eating disorders. And I always say, statistics are people with the tears washed away. I think that's really, really important that every time you give a number, you know that there's people behind it and not just that person, but the people around the person. But for a long time in my career, I could talk about the mortality rate without having lost a patient. But if you're in this field very long, you do lose patients because it is the psychiatric disorder with the highest mortality rate aside from opiate addiction.
That just changed, I feel.
Yes, and that just changed, yes.
Recent,
right.
Yeah.
It was always eating disorders, and now because of opiate addiction, that comes first. And let you have first place. This is not a competition.
Of course, yeah.
So the thing you have to understand is that you are going to really work very, very hard for a lot of people and a lot of families. And for some, it's just not going to come together soon enough. Other things are going to get in the way. Eating disorders also have a very high suicide rate because people get so depressed when you have an eating disorder. The malnourishment also affects your brain chemistry. The brain is not different from the rest of your body. It needs nutrients and it needs to be fed and watered. So you do face losing patients, losing people that you really loved and cared for and didn't think you were going to lose. Often it is patients that we don't think are going to die that die. So that's really, really heartbreaking. There's a lot of heartbreaking things in this work, but you also see people come back from near death, and you see the spirit continue.
I feel like that's the best part, right? Is when you can see someone return to life
Yes.
and their personalities, humor, interests come back, and you get to like really know who they are and welcome back to the world.
Yes.
That's so, that is such a gift.
Yeah. They're born again, kind of.
Totally. Yeah. And I don't know if this is related to the next question, which is my third question, your biggest accomplishment, something you're most proud of in terms of this work.
I'm most proud of doing the work, of being brave enough to do this work and being insightful enough to know it needs to be done and it's important work, and to fight the fights that I did all along. You know, I worked in hospital-based care for a long time, and it was always a fight. It was always a fight with hospital administrators who didn't always understand, but sooner or later they did. And I didn't want to put that much money into your program because you cost more than other programs, but we need more staff than other programs because we need a dietitian, we need a nurse, we need this, we need that. So I'm really proud of having always fought that fight. But I think one of the things I'm the most proud of is I've written about 8 books in the field of eating disorders. 2 of them are revisions of earlier works. So you could say 6 to 8, whatever. It's a lot of books. It's
a lot
of time at the computer.
I know.
And the things I wrote about, no one else had written about. I picked areas that we didn't know much about, but that I could see were important. So my first book was about fathers. It's called Father Hunger. And fathers and daughters in the pursuit of thinness. I think in psychology in general, but especially in eating disorders, we've really focused a lot on the mother-daughter relationship and mother-daughter bonding, et cetera, and kind of forgotten that there's another person around who might have a big impact on how a girl feels about herself as a little girl, as an emerging woman, as an adult woman, who might represent a lot about the male culture to her, and that's all really important. So I wrote the first book about fathers. My next book was Body Wars that you mentioned. And when I wrote Father Hunger, nobody had talked about fathers at all. Body Wars is about the ways in which our culture puts us at war with our bodies, but what we can do to fight back individually and systemically. So there were a lot of books about bad body image. They were a dime a dozen, but nothing about how to fight back. So I was really proud of that. And then I wrote a book about effective clinical practice in the treatment of eating disorders, The Heart of the Matter. I thought what you learn in coursework and in books is like how to do a treatment, how to do a method of treatment, but you don't really learn about what really happens in the therapy. What is the heart of the matter? What is the heart of recovery? So I had about 25 authors contribute to chapters that really helped to make it much bigger. Like there was a chapter about spirituality. I wrote a chapter about culture. So that was another book. Then I wrote a book about the gap between research and practice, because that's another problem in our field. There's a lot of research, but it doesn't really reflect what the patient experiences and what the clinician experiences. So they're very abstract and they don't necessarily help you know what to do with a patient. So that's another big book. And then I wrote a couple of books on treating adult women with eating disorders. The last one is Pursuing Perfection. And again, nobody had really looked at adults with eating disorders. We kind of stopped at 25-ish. And I thought that was very, very important. Once I started really paying attention to that problem, there are more adult women in our culture, women at midlife and older, who have eating disorders than who have breast cancer. Like, that's astounding. We don't kind of know that.
No, because 1 in 8 has had a diagnosis or have current diagnosis of breast cancer.
Right.
I just heard that statistic the other day.
Yeah. Right.
It's mind-blowing.
Yep. So, and eating disorders are more. So, I am very proud of that work because, you know, now it's much more out there. And recently I've been doing some presentations about menopause and eating disorders, and that's really important too. So, those are my books in eating disorders. I'm really, really happy that I kind of got ideas in my head, and I'm, in addition to all my clinical work, my advocacy and all that, I took the time to write about them so other people would also understand them. And I do a lot of presentations as well. And then my last book was my book about hair, which I know people don't really understand at all.
I love it. We're going to get to it. I can't wait. I feel like we need a whole other episode just on hair.
Yeah.
And I a friend of mine and colleague, and she's in this field. She's a recovery coach, Meg McCabe, shout out, who is actually helping people podcast.
Okay, great.
So she's been also in front of another mentor, even just in podcasting. But she had mentioned that one of the reasons why some of her clients seek treatment is because of their hair.
Their hair falling out, yes.
And losing a hair, wanting your hair back. But that has been a main motivator for seeking treatment.
Yeah.
So it's a huge topic. And so when I picked up, and I have read your work, obviously, and my dissertation was on perfectionism in athletes. And so, of course, your book came in handy there. And such a strong correlation too, but with perfections and eating disorders. Anyway, your book about hair, maybe we shift to that. So tell us a little bit about how this came to be, how you decided to write about hair. I know you've probably been asked this a lot. But...
Yeah, well, there's multiple roads that led to this. One is, as you mentioned, our patients gradually lose their hair with the malnutrition that they go through. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes that can be the thing that identifies them as needing help, and that they can see that. Like, they can't see that their insides are starving, but they can see that their hair is thin.
Right.
And sometimes the hairdresser is the person who kind of gets them in the door of treatment too. It's very interesting. And I also, lots of times with patients, found that they might hate their bodies, but they still liked their hair. Their hair was still important to them. So that was one little road in. And another road was just, I am not someone who fusses with my hair. I've been a swimmer my whole life, spent a lot of time outside. Having a fancy hairdo just doesn't work for me. I wouldn't know how to do it, and I wouldn't care to do it. So, but when I mentioned that I speak at a lot of conferences, so over the years, speaking at conferences, sharing rooms with other top women in my field, all of us are telling people, to not focus too much on what they look like and all of that. And yet these women, my roommates, were always spending about 40 minutes in the morning on their hair.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes. And then you'd see them midday and their hair would look just like it did before, but not when they had it all done. Anyway, that was one of the things I was always like, I'm out running and they're working on their hair. So I started to realize that my relationship with my hair was different than theirs. And I had different thoughts about it over the years. And then the pandemic came. And, women were really, really upset about not being able to get their hair colored, or for African-American women who had their hair straightened and treated and all of that, to not be able to get it treated. Women felt really out of control of their hair. Like, we were out of control of everything, but for a lot of women, it was this that really got them. And so that was another road into this topic. And the other road, of course, was because of the pandemic. I had a lot more time. I was still working, but we weren't doing any of the extra things. We had no conferences going on. So I had been thinking about hair for a long time. I'd started to write about it, but it gave me the time to really spend on this. Well, I see women as using our bodies as the canvas for a lot of other things that go on for us in contemporary society. And so hair is kind of the top of it, and it's the most visible feature to other people. It's interesting, when a baby is born, often the comments people make are about the hair. Look at that head of hair. Look at that dark hair. Look at that pretty blonde hair. I hope it doesn't get darker. But it's, it's kind of like the entry.
Yeah.
And
day one.
Yeah. So, and it becomes a very major part for most women of their self-image, because it can be altered. It can be, colored, it can be cut, it can be curled, all kinds of things can happen to it. And it can be changed really quickly. It can call attention to you or not. So all of those things kind of blended together. And I started, reading more about the history of hair and how hair is used in other cultures, like in many cultures, when children go from say kindergarten to grade school age, or go through puberty, or then be leaving the family to get married. Each one of those stages comes with different expectations around hair and different hairdos, hairstyles.
Indeed.
So it's very interesting that hair often signifies developmental issues and emotional issues. It's a way of saying I'm part of this culture or I'm not part of this culture. I don't want to be part of this culture. So there's lots and lots of ways in which hair represents deep things inside us. It's not just a physical characteristic. As a physical characteristic, it's pretty rich too. It has a very, very long life. Your hair will last for a long, long time. For decades. So I found it pretty fascinating. And so I wrote a book. I wrote another book.
Why not? Just add another book to the list.
And so the name of the book is Hair Tells a Story, because for everybody, hair tells a story. And you got it there.
It's highlighted and notes.
Yeah. When I was writing it, when I was, thinking about it and writing it initially, I thought, well, hair tells a story. Hair is a woman's issue, but hair is other women's issues. I didn't really think I had an issue with it. But then when I got to the point where, I'd been reading and thinking about this so much, I realized I had issues too. And I wrote a chapter about that. But for me, probably the primary issue is, although I am really a very natural person, everything about me is real except my hair color. When I was 16, my hair started to get gray. I had an aunt whose hair was totally gray by the time she was 30. And she was the person I was supposed to look like. So, it was kind of funny to have a gray hair here and there every now and then. And, a boyfriend would take a hair and somebody had a gray hair of yours. But it wasn't really all that funny. And so by the time I was in my late 20s, I had a little bit more, and early 30s, a little bit more. And my hairdresser would use henna on it to cover it. And then that didn't work anymore. And then she started using hair dye. And then you are covering the gray. And then all of a sudden you realize you're being fake too. So it took me a while to realize that and how important it was for me. I don't want to have my hair completely gray. So I have it it is mostly gray, but not completely gray. And then there's, she puts some blondie type stuff in on top. But I'm not ready to have that gray hair that my aunt had when she was 30.
That is premature grayness.
Yes.
16.
Right. Yeah. So that was, and I had never put that all together before. Hair is a big part of our identity, and I don't want to be seen as I don't want to be old, so I don't want to be seen as old. I don't mind getting old because I still have a very full life. And I think women can be very vibrant and involved in life, no matter how old they are. But I don't want the gray hair.
Indeed. Yeah. So, I think that just speaks to in our culture, what does gray hair mean? Yeah. And, I will say from my personal experience, you are the most vivacious woman. There's nothing gray about you. I would never use that color to describe you at all. But I've also told this to some clients of, but if you're not aging, you're dead.
Yes, exactly.
Right? And so so what, there are some pieces of aging that that maybe that feel more easily acceptable to us. I don't know. But I think having had lost some friends, too early, I think about that.
Yes.
That it's a gift to be able to age. And so even, AC back or whatever, or stray gray hair or whatever, turn to welcome those things. And yet what does that mean too, right?
Yes.
When we feel
young, vivacious, had a lot to give and a lot of life, right? So I appreciate your honesty about that, and your honesty in the book about that too. That you're literally not hiding behind the veil or hiding behind a book, but like how this is really personal to you too. But I haven't read a lot like since grad school. Full
you haven't had much
disclosure.
time, honey.
Well, but just that, like, it's like when I finished swimming, like, in college, it's like I haven't really been in a pool much. It's like I haven't really picked up many books because I had, had to read so much, and it was mandated that I do. And so, but here and there I dabble with books and reading, and yours was one that I could, and I read books about eating disorders. It's not that it's late reading, but I'm it's something I liked. I enjoy it. But your book I could not put down.
Oh, great.
On hair, it was so interesting, and you just did such a beautiful job. Anytime I can read a book that blends research with personal stories, I'm totally invested. And that was your book, and so I always think about what the barbershop red and blue signifies. And I think about that all the time, right? Like that hairdressers weren't just hairdressers, that they were like medical.
They were medicine men. Yes, right.
Yes, right. And so can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, and to this day, the barbers, if you will, were seen as doctors, and they were seen as medicine people. And to this day, when you think about hairdresser, hairstylist, we don't call them hairdressers anymore. You're dating yourself, you call them hairdressers. They're stylists, are still that person to many people. Hairdressers will, well, first of all, they touch you, and there aren't too many professions now where touch is legal. And so once somebody touches you, your guard is down a little bit. So that, and also if you get regular hair care, and lots of people, men and women, see a hairdresser or stylist multiple times a year. It's rare. There are some women who will let their hair grow for a couple of years at a time, but most people get their hair done, once every couple of months, sometimes once a month. And so you see that person more, and that person becomes sometimes a friend, sometimes an advisor. The things that people talk about with their hairstylists and in the hair salon are multiple, and they're intense. And that's why the hairstylist often is the key to getting somebody in the door for help for an eating disorder, because they see that the hair is thinning or other things. There's a organization in the hair world that trains hairstylists to be alert to the signs of domestic violence.
Wow.
And that's an example of a woman may say something to a hairstylist that she'd never say to anybody else. Like if the hairstylist sees like a bald patch underneath, it could be because her hair has been yanked and pulled out. And so over time, the hairstylist knows how to say that to people, or if they see bruising, or if it's somebody who comes regularly and then doesn't come for a while. So that's an example of an incredibly close relationship a woman has with the stylist, that she's not going to tell anybody else about this. But if the stylist says something, or if the stylist has some materials around the salon that kind of open up that subject, it can really be useful. So to this day, they are still that medicine person. They are still a person who cares about you as a person, who wants to help you, who has something for you that nobody else is going to offer you in terms of understanding and acceptance. I just think, and during the pandemic, I started to see them as they are the front line. They are first responders. So they work very long, hard hours. They have a lot of adversity in their work. It's hard on their bodies as they get older. They don't make all that much money. I mean, the hairdressers, the stars do, but regular hairdressers don't make all that much money. And it's pretty hard work and pretty demanding emotionally. You have to be, ready and smiling for the next person to come in. And people often have high expectations of what they're going to look like when they get out and that they're going to feel all better too.
Right. Fix this.
Yes,
Yeah.
right.
Mm-hmm.
So it is interesting.
It makes sense to me, like, the barbershops and like people hanging out all day, right? Like just being able to talk about things and it feels like a safe space to do that. So yeah.
And for men, it is that as well. Yeah.
Right. Right. Yeah. And maybe that's the only place where they feel like they can.
Yeah.
It's a side note. I get my hair cut at a barbershop.
Do you really? That's so cool.
Because I brought my son, who's 5.5, and I just was like, could you do a quick, trim? And there are 3 barbers that work there, and they, I asked one, he was like, if it's easy and a quick, easy cut, sure, I can do it. And I went back and I did do it because I washed my hair. My hair was wet. Let's just do it. $25 later, I was like, this is great. This is all I need, and much better than I can do because I was cutting my hair during the pandemic.
Right. Yeah.
But I also felt like, wow, I get it. Like I could see why hanging out there feels really comfortable for people.
There are places where there's a lot of community, and both barbershops and hair salons. Often they're doing a fair amount of volunteer work. If there's some campaign going on in the town for raising money for someone whose house caught on fire or anything like that, they are really active folks. They're always doing something good.
Yeah. No, it's great. I think we need another podcast episode about this stuff because I'm thinking of all of these directions I could go in, but I will end with our last and 5th question, which I feel like might be a popular question that I might ask a lot of my guests. I don't know if it will be in every episode, but I'm wondering if there's been, and I know there's been, so what has been your frequently most asked question from people, and how do you answer it?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it's the most frequent, but it probably is up there. People often ask me, it might be other clinicians, it might be family members, it might be patients. They often ask me whether I had an eating disorder because I'm so passionate about them. And I never have had my own eating disorder, but I don't have to have cancer to not like cancer and to fight against cancer. I've been around it enough. I've had it in my family, but I don't have to have it myself. And it's the same thing with eating disorders. I've been around it enough. And also as a woman living in this culture, I have a sense of how hard it is to hang on to yourself and to feel okay about your body and about your appearance and to not let other people judge you and tear you down because you don't do this or you don't do that or you're not tall enough or you're not short enough or you're not whatever enough or your hair is gray. So I didn't need an eating disorder to be impassioned about it, just like I don't need a lot of things to be impassioned to help other people. But that has always been this question that people ask me, well, you're so into this. You must have had an eating disorder. No, but I have a sense of what it's like to be a woman in this culture and to be, like kind of tortured at times around pressures about appearance and about dieting and about, being perfect. And it can be never ending at times. So that's the question I think is the most frequent in my experience.
Well said. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for sharing so much of yourself in this interview. I really appreciate you as a person, friend, mentor, eating disorder psychologist. You're amazing. I adore you and really appreciate your time and feel like we need 5 more episodes to talk about other topics. So if you'll come back, I'd love it.
Okay.
But for now, thank you so much, Margo.
Yeah,
I really appreciate you. Thank you.
And thanks for the honor of being your first guest. That was really exciting for me too.
Hell, I wouldn't want it any other way. Thank you, Margo.
The best to you and to your audience.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And hopefully we'll have the best. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to listen in this week. I'm so glad you're here with me as we learn more from our wise bodies and about eating disorder recovery. For more, follow me on social media, and please share the Wise Body podcast with your friends. Lastly, if you're interested in a free client consultation, please reach out on drhughes.com. And remember, always take care of yourself and your temple. See you next time on the Wise Body podcast.